So welcome to the Node.js Technical Steering Committee meeting for July 10th, 2024. We'll follow the agenda that was created in the TSC repo, which was issue 1592. Before we dive into things, we'll start with, does anybody have any announcements they'd like to share this week?
We had a secret release on Monday. So if you are running into outdated version, please upgrade.
Any other announcements people would like to share? Okay, just a reminder, if you see people doing, interesting, notable work, please nominate them for the contributor spotlight. In terms of the CPC and board meeting updates, I guess, Matteo, any updates or things to discuss or share on that front?
No, I shared what I thought was meaningful last week.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't have any more updates.
Okay, sounds good. We'll move on then to the first issue, which was tagged for the agenda, which is NPM is installed wrongly on Windows machines. I don't know if there's anybody who's been involved in that issue discussion to date.
I spoke a bit with Yagis about this yesterday. I mean, there's been some exchange in the thread. The main reason he tagged it was to raise the visibility of it. The bug has apparently been there for a while, without getting any attention, but apparently there's even a YouTube video about how to work around it. I mean, so people are hitting this thing in the wild. And it'd be great to have this fixed. The problem is that there doesn't seem to be anybody willing to step up to help fix it up to this point. So it was tagged really just to kind of raise the visibility of it and go from there. Benjamin.
Sorry, Benjamin has his hand up. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So basically, we can't really fix it as far as I understand from our side because we used to create that folder and we stopped doing so for security reasons. And NPM has to fix it on their side. The problem is we're not really sure how to put pressure or communicate to NPM. It's a high severity issue for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there I wonder, is there already issues open in the NPM repo?
Yeah, this has been, so it's my understanding is it's been a bug for a long time, and we made it slightly worse by making a change in a security release that stopped us from creating a certain folder that NPM relies on. And the expectation is that NPM would create that folder, which it apparently has never done and still isn't doing. And so it was always broken. If you installed Node using one user globally and then switched to a different user on Windows, you would run into the same bug. So we made it slightly worse because now it affects all users uniformly, and before it only affected other users on the same machine. And there is an easy one-liner workaround that you can find anywhere. There's really nothing we can do except ask NPM to maybe patch that, or if someone wants to contribute to NPM, go ahead.
Yeah.
And to be fair, this is exactly what Benjamin suggested the conversation during this meeting would be like.
I know. It did give me a good chuckle, so thank you for that. I guess, is this only with the Windows installer?
Yes, and it's not really well. The change on our side was that we stopped the installer creating the directory for you, but it's an effective problem because of on Windows NPM behaves differently for global prefix installs. So on most platforms, a global prefix install in NPM will go into the same sort of directory alongside your node installation by default. but on Windows it ends up in like /app data roaming something. So there's a completely different directory structure for global installs on Windows. But I mean, that's documented in the NPM documentation. So it's actually documented behavior that will go in this directory. So yeah, I kind of agree with others that have sort of said, expressed the opinion that, if that directory is required by NPM, NPM ought to be creating that directory if it's not there. But yeah, we used to create it in our installer on Windows, but we no longer do. And that was a security release. That was a response to some privilege escalation issue that, you could end up creating something with elevated permissions.
Does our document, I mean, I'm just thinking of like, what can we practically do? Does our installation instructions just like, do we say create this directory or is
Well,
that
no,
something
we
like
don't
added
say
it?
anything. We just assume the things work, and they obviously don't.
Right,
Yeah, I
but I'm
think-
just wondering if we actually updated our documentation to say after you run the installer, you need to do X. Like, is that
Well, what documentation? I don't think anyone reads any of our documentation for installing. This is all back to the how should I install Node on my system, and the conversations we've had in the recent few months on what the optimum way of getting Node, a package manager, and such like onto your system. Because we get enough, we get the occasional complaints about like the chocolatey scripts that the installer installs, and there are things on the installation dialogues that sort of try and explain what those are for, but people are just skipping through them and sort of just blindly selecting options. So
One
we
thing,
could document things, but I doubt it's going to help much.
sorry, Richard, one thing we could theoretically do is add yet another page to the Windows installer that prompts the user, hey, do you want to create this directory? Please triple check because it is a security issue if you do use this feature, and don't triple check the directory here. So we can add a convenience feature that kind of works around the issue for the current Windows unprivileged user, reintroducing a potential security issue for convenience. But that's pretty much all we can do from our side. And it would be something where we heavily rely on the user triple checking everything to not run into security issues.
And
so
they won't.
my
But
position
again,
on that is we should not do that, but that's the only option I can think of.
But again, we have to also consider that, not everyone will be using the installer to install this. So, we do produce zips and 7-zip packages of like the Windows Node SDK. And if you would just unpack that and run it, you wouldn't get that directory created either.
No, and any other user on the system will not have it created either. So this would just be restoring the previous behavior of the installer and putting the responsibility on the user to make sure it's a good choice. And yeah, as James said, that's probably not a good idea.
They won't. Yeah.
Joy suggested in the NPM issue, I can add the link to the chat. She suggested that maybe NPM or NPX in particular should probably just provide some more information about this when users run into the issue on the command line. Maybe suggest a workaround or so. If it's really a bug that they cannot fix for some reason, then maybe at least guide the user towards the solution when the user runs into the issue.
So I think what I'm hearing at this point is like there definitely needs to be some work at NPM to actually fix the problem. Somebody would have to contribute it there. On our side, the best we could do is more documentation somewhere, or add steps that users probably won't pay attention to. I think at this point, if there is a different proposal, we just need somebody to come with a concrete proposal that we can.
I think it's very reasonable to expect the NPM team to work on this, but I do understand that it's frustrating for Yagis to have us ship this quote-unquote broken version of NPM with Node.
Yeah. Well, it's not just Yagi. I've actually ran into people that have had this frustration a number of times who have dealt with this. Um, so I mean, the fact that somebody was motivated enough to go do a video on how to work around it is kind of telling. That there are people hitting this, hitting this and being pretty frustrated. So
Just another thought, our website where we have instructions like links to install the different versions, would there be any value like having a link to that video that says like, yeah, here's the installer, but here's a known issue, here's how you work around it. I mean,
I think documenting the known issue on our side at least acknowledges that yes, we know about this. We're not ignoring it. But it needs to be fixed somewhere else because the problem's not actually in our code. I think having that documentation, even if people generally aren't going to read it, right, it gives us something to point at least and say, yes, we know that this is a known issue, and other people can point at that as well. So.
so I guess, the action of this is like, if there were any volunteers who wanted to go and add some documentation, that would be well received. I don't know, otherwise than that, it sounds like there is NPM issues open, and I don't know if there's anything we can do as like a TSC, we could send an email on behalf of the TSC to NPM saying, please, we think this is important. I don't know.
Given the current state of NPM, I don't think that would do much good. I mean, it would just kind of get in the noise, washed in the noise.
Right.
So I think it's going to be somebody has to actively get involved with that project and go fix it.
Okay. So I'm gonna then put in, volunteers to add doc or engage with NPM would be greatly appreciated. But otherwise, we're gonna take it off the agenda, right? That makes sense to everybody. Basically, it was on the agenda for awareness. We've had a discussion. And that's basically what we'll plan to do.
Yep.
Okay, let me just do that before I forget, because otherwise I will forget. Sorry, just moving it up. Okay, we can then move on to the next issue, which was the new strategic initiative on primordials. I think that one had been on hold because I know that it was Antoine and Ruben were going to get together. I think actually we might have even agreed to take that off the agenda until they came back. Is that just other people's remembering? Yeah, I can see. Okay, so Antoine and Ruben did mention that they're having a call. They said if people wanted to join. I don't know, maybe we leave it on the agenda for this time since we don't have either of them to kind of give us an update as to whether it's okay to take it off and wait until they come back with something. But anybody have anything they'd like to add or discuss on this one this week?
I mean, it seems like we're opening all these PRs to remove prototypes across the code base. So it seems like we're skipping over the come up with an initiative aspect and just implementing the change, which I guess is fine. But yeah, I don't know. Was there like something? I think the initiative was meant to like define where we want to preserve prototypes and where we don't think we need them anymore. And now that's happening in like kind of an ad hoc way. So I guess maybe that's fine, but if there's, if anyone wants to like put more thought into this, I guess then now's the time before we start landing all these, or maybe they've already started landing.
Well, I mean, I would be careful there. I mean, it's like, people doing PRs doesn't mean they're PRs right now doesn't mean they're not putting thought into it.
No, I mean like a thought
we're gonna
into like a
block-
generalized policy of prototypes in general.
Yeah.
Like clearly I guess we're already making the decision that we're not going to preserve prototypes or primordials everywhere, So I guess we're okay with that, but I think that was one of the first decisions that the initiative was meant to address.
I guess the way I'd look at it is like if you have strong views, maybe get, talk to Antoine or Ruben, who've obviously chatted. And you could get involved if it's kind of like, hey, if otherwise I think people it's our standard way of like PRs get opened and landed, they get open and landed versus forcing having a strategy necessarily up front, unless there's enough people who are like, oh, let's stop and have a strategy, right?
I mean, I think if these PRs continue to land, then maybe we don't need the initiative. Like it sounds like no one's opposed to removing primordials from broad swaths of the code base. And, I think there was some concern about like, oh, we need to preserve them in errors and maybe one or two other places. And presumably that'll surface when someone opens a PR to try to remove primordials from those spots. And kind of that's it. And then we don't need the initiative. I don't know.
I think it's probably best to just wait for Ruben and Antoine to give us an update because, like, if you understood the vibe correctly, then yes, but maybe they came to an agreement where in some parts it's like okay to remove, and other parts we should, like, other than errors, we should enforce it, and then they'll probably like finish talking about it. And of course, they invited like interested parties to participate in the discussion and like come with a recommendation to us.
Okay. So
Yeah,
maybe leave it on the agenda for next time and hopefully one of them will give us an update.
sounds good. And then the last one which was on the agenda, which was next time funding deep dive. I guess we're just having a challenge finding people who are interested in discussing. So the next 10 team is going to figure out next steps on that. And I took it off the agenda until we managed to do that. So at this point, I'm going to flip over to the strategic initiatives. We can just do a quick update through there. I'm just looking. I don't know, James, anything on the quick HTTP3 you'd like to share?
Progress is being made. Very, very, very slowly. I have a PR that I'm working on right now. It's largely ready to land, starts to create the internal JavaScript API for it again. But it's bumping up against the test coverage limit. We need a minimum number of minimum coverage for the CI job to pass, and this squeaks in just under the limit. So not all of it is ready to test because there's still a bunch more that needs to be done. So I'm probably going to have to just comment out sections of it to bump that test coverage back up until those pieces are ready to land. So I'm going to play with it a little bit more today, but I should be able to get that landed this week and then keep working on it. No timeline yet. My rough goal is I'm hoping to have it done within all done and ready to ship by the end of the year. But I can only work on it maybe a few days a month. So it goes really, really slow.
Okay, I see Joey, you're filling in the startup snapshot update.
Yeah, just a quick update. There was a regression after a backport of a V8 patch, so it was fixed upstream and backported. The was backported.
Okay, thanks. On the next 10 front, I think our current task is we're going through the survey results. They were landed in the repo, and sort of we're going to put together like some suggested next steps, that kind of stuff. I don't know, Marco, if there's anything else you can think of we should share on that front.
Yeah, I will like at the next meeting we will start to create a blog post. So I guess we can we will probably ping TSC to validate, like send it to check, and probably publish it in the future. So I will give updates in the next meetings.
Thanks. And I don't know if there's anything you wanted to say on primordials, Benjamin.
Nope.
Okay, so that takes us to the end of the list, I think, for people who are here and the different initiatives. So at this point, that takes us to the end of the agenda. Is there anything else that we should discuss in the private section before we move on to the public? Sorry, in the public session before we move on to the private session?
Do we mind discussing the unflag detect module PR if we have time? I can put
I
the
think we
link in
can
here.
probably expend like 5-10 minutes on that if we cap it to there.
Sure. So yeah, I put the link in there. Basically, I just want to know what we want to do in terms of flags for this and landing it on which release lines. So as far as I could, if you look at the link, there were some tests I had to adjust to, make this enabled all the time. Most of them, or half of them, I don't think should be considered breaking changes. The other half, like 3 of the 4 are related to the loader hooks, so I don't, those are experimental, so I don't think those really matter too much. And then the last one was just that, like, either running or importing an extensionless file, where literally the file on disk has no extension, not that we're just leaving it off when we're typing, used to error, and now it doesn't. So I guess that's the question, is that considered a breaking change? And then if it is, then how do we handle, like, if it's not considered a breaking change, we could just land this and backport it, and that's it. If it is considered a breaking change or possibly a breaking change, then we can come up with various options of either landing it on 23 and never backporting it, landing it with a flag to be able to turn it off, et cetera, et cetera. Sorry, Richard?
Yeah, so just with my LTS release hat on, if there's any risk to, look the LTS releases, and this is not like, is it breaking or not? It's like, is there a risk in terms of like, then I would prefer if there was some flag to, even if we decided that, yes, we could backport it and have it enabled, some sort of escape hatch would give me much more confidence that we could ship that and then, not have to scramble and do some sort of revert back, reverse out. If there was some way we could tell people, well, if you do run into problems with this, here's a flag you can do to restore the old behavior, if that's possible. So yeah, just in terms of the LTS releases, if we decide that this could be backported, I would still prefer some sort of flag, if possible, to restore the the behavior as is at the moment, because that would then just give me a bit more confidence that we could ship that and give people running that the option of not using it if it turns out to cause any problems.
Okay. Benjamin?
Yeah, so I tried really hard to come up with a case where it is breaking, and I really can't. So like I think it's safe. I suggest we land it on like 23 and like wait for a few days to see there is no breakage and then backport it. I think it's a good feature and like pretty stable. So just that.
So I could update the OpenPR to add essentially a -- no detect module flag so that you have the escape hatch. And then we landed on main, but then it just sits there until October in 23. Is that what? Oh, sorry, Marco, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so about the opposite flag, I think that's by default. So whenever you create an experimental flag, you also have the no blah, blah, blah experimental flag. So if we decided to enable it by default, we should probably leave that on. But in my opinion, like this is something that should run in December major. We add it as a put my releaser hat on. Mark it as baking for LTS. We wait like some time, like a good amount of time to see if anything breaks, and if not, we can just remove the backing for LTS and backport it.
Okay, so then if I understand you right, it's the same as what I was just saying, right? I'll make sure that the like no detect module version works. I mean, unless we want, I guess right now we have no -- no experimental detect module. I was gonna just change that to get the experimental out of the name, unless you think just leave the experimental in there.
It like if we mark it as like, I think that the thing that something is experimental and the fact that it is not under a flag anymore, I think those are two separate topics.
Okay, yeah,
Something can be enabled and still be experimental.
Okay, it is still experimental. So I'll leave the experimental and then in the name. Then I guess the flag is already there. I just have to.
Yeah.
Okay, so the only change I need to make then in the PR is this PR currently makes the flag into a no op. I'll make it so that it still has an effect. It's just the default is flipped to be true by default instead of false by default, and update the docs somehow to only list it under no detect module instead of detect module or something like that. Does that? And then we'll release it only in 20. So we'll land it on main, but it'll sit on main until October, and the first release to go out in is 23. Is that what everyone wants to do?
I think we should land it in 22 with the same pattern.
Like landed in 22 sooner than October, you mean? Or after it's been out in 23?
No, like land in 22 now, okay, with the same exact pattern. It's not, and not almost never backported to 20. Like there is no
sorry. Like given that 22 is still a current, this is technically possible, but I would not like, since we need to mark 22 as LTS, I think, and it's like in like we still have time probably to figure out, but to be extra safe, I would land it. I would not recommend doing that.
Like the problem, sorry what I want to avoid, okay, is so if we don't land it on 22 now, I have a feeling that landing it on 23 and then backporting will be too breaking. So I don't suspect it would be easy to backport. Okay. So there will be like, especially because there will be a lot of edge cases that will come out of this work, okay, that are currently not being handled. Okay. And you really don't want to, like, people don't use the current release. Okay. People only use the LTS release. Okay. So either this feature is in when 22 is cut as LTS, and then as people migrate, when that ramps up slowly, we see the bugs, okay, and then we can make a conscious decision if we want to revert it or not, okay. and maybe fix as they come in. Or if we wait until 22 is at its peak of the release of adoption for backporting, then we make a lot of noise for a lot of people, okay? And then I don't see us, as I said, I don't see us backporting. I don't see this feature, backporting this feature to a LTS line unless way further down the line, okay? After it has been used by a lot of people, okay? So,
I mean, I guess there's an argument
it's,
to be said that like 22 isn't that widely used yet. Like it's only been out for a few
yeah,
months.
that's
So like if
that's
we wait
the,
until October or November, December to backport it to 22, a lot more people will be on 22 by then.
like so like my take here is if we don't relent it in, if we don't, like, until we give this in front of the users, we won't get the feedback we need, okay? So the sooner the better, essentially. And if we don't consider it breaking, I would, and as I said, I would never backport this to us to an LTS release, okay? Like this, this is my, I feel it will be a huge pain coming, okay? Also from past experiences. So I would not backport it to an LTS release, but apart from that, I think we should, like, if we think it's not breaking, we should, if we think it's breaking, then ship it on 23 and that stays on 23. Okay. If we think it's if we think we don't know, let's ship it as soon as possible on 22 with a dot backport flag, and then reassess after and reassesses later on. This gives us essentially a path for this feature to be shipped on 22 LTS. After that block, I don't think us. I think if we backport it later on, this will be, we need to be sure we're not breaking anybody. And unless we get massive adoption on the feature, we'll never be. So essentially, it's a chicken and egg problem.
I mean, it could be breaking anyone who's relying on this current behavior that errors. Like if they're looking for an error to know whether a file can be imported or not, and then determining the ESM versus CommonJS format based on whether or not an exception was thrown. Like it'll just no longer error, you know? So, you know, it's like a bit of a weird case where is that considered a breaking change? I just don't know.
I like my recommendation would be, if we think it's fine, okay, or let's land it soon. Let's ship it, okay? Let's put in the end of people, okay? People will test it, will report it. If we need to make a case for a revert, it's still an experimental feature, if I understand correctly. And it's we are just unflagging it, so we can still pull it back in its box, okay, and just ship it on 23.
Well, I'll at least put in the no flag and make sure that works.
Yeah.
I'll add a test for it, so we can at least do that. So that way, even if we break
Yeah.
someone, even within that release, they have an escape hatch.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm okay either way. I mean, does everyone else feel okay with landing this on 22?
I just want to capture. So my understanding is like, we don't think it's breaking. But we think there is a risk that it could be. So like, we'd rather take that risk now versus, you know, when we backport it to an LTS. The one thing I don't have full understanding of is like, in terms of the risk, is it to the risk of people, like just anybody, or to people who are using the experimental feature?
Anybody.
Anybody, right? So like the risk is like, this could break somebody who has no idea about this feature at all, and therefore we don't think it will, but like we think there's enough risk we're hesitating. It's okay.
There is a slight change of behavior. Okay, it's there is a slight change of behavior. Okay, now the problem is the change of behavior is in the code that used to handle that a developer will need to handle a deficiency, let's call it, or a lacking of Node.js. Okay, so you will try to do something and now it's not working anymore. Okay, like it's like you were trying to do a require, like the typical pattern is I try to do a require If the requires throw me an ESM error, I handle that error, and then I import the thing. Okay, that's the pattern. Now, that I use it all the time. Okay, now the same pattern, okay, follows if the first require will not throw anymore. So technically, okay, it's the code will still work, okay, but I don't know if I am relying on 100% code coverage system, that other branch in my code coverage will not be executed, okay, because it's not throwing anymore on this version of Node, okay, and so that's the gist of my assessment of the breaking. Like, I will have this problem, okay, as a generic thing. As one people using this feature, okay, I would prefer very much to not have to handle all that dance before my right now. And so I will prefer to have a path. So when I remove support for 20, I can, hey, this is automatically auto detection now. I can remove all the code. Okay.
It's the same question as backporting require VSM or import of a TypeScript file. Like, those are both things that currently error that might just start to work. So where you would be breaking anyone who wrote code expecting an error and was, doing a try catch or something. So that's the thing. Sorry, Marco, you had your hand.
Okay, I think we should close out because we need to get to the private section. So maybe
Just-
Mark,
Marco,
and then let's close out.
Just one last note. One thing that I encountered and it concerned me is that if the syntax is ambiguous, it will fall back to CJS by default. This is something that I noticed, and like this could break some people.
I think
So
it's the
this
other
is
way
something
around,
to-
is that if it's doing that because the opposite would be breaking, because CommonJS is already the default in Node. We can talk
Yeah,
about
I
it on
remember
the
that.
issue.
Yeah, I think
But
if you can talk about that online, we'll leave it. We can, maybe tag it for the agenda if you want to continue the discussion. I assume one more week isn't going to be a big deal.
No, that's
Okay.
fine.
Okay, so let's close out and move to the private section so we have enough time. Thanks everybody who is watching on the live stream.